It started as a routine interview, the kind political junkies watched with half their attention, and casual viewers leave on in the background. But within minutes, Barack Obama was revealing what no one dared to say out loud about Donald Trump, and the reaction across America proved the truth still has power. The lights inside the PBS studio in Boston were sharp, the cameras relentless, and the atmosphere so charged it felt like the country itself was holding its breath. Millions of Americans tuned in expecting civility, maybe a touch of nostalgia, but nothing earth-shaking. The guest, Barack Obama, carried himself with the same calm demeanor people remembered from the White House. Across from him sat Karen Delaney, a seasoned journalist who had built her reputation on composure and precision. She wasn't here to flatter. She wasn't here to soften. She leaned forward, voice steadied, but cutting straight to what the nation wanted. "Mr. President," she asked, "there's no easy way to put this. What are your honest thoughts on Donald Trump and the role he plays in American politics today?" The audience shifted in their seats. Some gasped softly, others whispered nervously. Everyone knew this wasn't a softball question. For years, Obama had been measured, cautious, refusing to roll in the mud no matter how deep others dragged it. He smiled politely, hands folded in his lap, but this time the smile didn't hide him. This time felt different. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, his voice low, calm, deliberate. "I've been quiet for a long time," he began, pausing long enough to let the silence press in. "But there are things the American people deserve to know about Donald Trump. Things that go beyond politics. Things I've kept to myself out of respect for the office. But respect, I've realized, has to go both ways." A murmur swept through the room. The camera panned across the audience. Students, journalists, ordinary citizens, all glued to him. Karen blinked, caught off guard but pressed forward. "Mr. President, are you saying there are details about Donald Trump's behavior in office that the public hasn't heard before?" Well, Obama didn't flinch. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The room erupted in whispers. Phones lit up instantly. Audience members texted, recorded, shared. This wasn't just another interview. It was history happening in real time. A young man in a Red Sox cap leaned over to his friend and whispered, "This is it. He's about to light him up." Obama continued, his tone still calm but edged with something sharper. "Politics can be dirty. We all know that. But when the leader of a country puts personal gain over the nation's security, when private deals start to matter more than public trust, that's when democracy itself is on the line." And Donald Trump did exactly that again and again. The words landed like a strike. Karen adjusted her glasses, visibly rattled. "Can you be specific?" she asked cautiously. Obama turned from her to the camera, no longer addressing the host, but the nation. His eyes were steady, his voice precise. "Let me give you one example. There was a phone call he made while in office late at night. I was briefed on it. He didn't speak as a president, representing the United States. He spoke as a businessman, protecting his own brand. That's all I'll say for now." Gasps echoed. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Karen's voice faltered. "Are you alleging that Donald Trump compromised national interest for personal business?" Obama tilted his head. "I'm saying Americans should ask themselves why certain decisions were made. Decisions that had nothing to do with public service and everything to do with self-interest." Applause broke out, spontaneous and raw, breaking the quiet rules of live television. The energy shifted. People were no longer just watching, they were reacting. Behind the cameras, producers scrambled. Some barked orders into headsets. Others gestured frantically at teleprompters. They knew they had a bombshell on their hand. But Obama didn't move. He didn't flinch. He sat still, hands folded, letting their reaction wash over him. "This isn't about me," he said when the clapping died down. "And it isn't even just about Trump. It's about what we as a people are willing to tolerate. Do we want a leader who treats the Oval Office like a bargaining chip? Or do we want a leader who respects it as the sacred responsibility it is?" The words cut deeper than insults ever could. He wasn't mocking. He wasn't raging. He was asking America to choose. Karen hesitated, her voice edged with tension. "Mr. President, I think you've just opened the door to something very serious. Are you ready to say more?" Obama gave the faintest of smiles. "We'll see how much truth the American people are ready for tonight." The audience exploded again. this time louder, sharper, like a release of years of pent-up frustration. Even Karen's composure cracked. This wasn't a routine interview anymore. It was a reckoning. And yet, as powerful as that first revelation was, it was only the beginning, because the next truths Obama was prepared to share would strike deeper than anyone expected. And once they left his lips, there would be no putting them back. The studio didn't calm down right away. The clapping, the whispers, the muffled, "Oh my God" reactions rippled like waves across the audience. Karen Delaney tried to bring the moment back under control, her voice a little more hurried now. "Ladies and gentlemen, please let's give President Obama the chance to continue." Slowly, the noise settled, all eyes fixed back on him. What struck people wasn't just what he had said, but how he said it. His posture upright but relaxed, his tone steady, his expression calm. He was the picture of composure, the exact opposite of the chaos his words had unleashed. Karen leaned in again, pushing carefully. "Mr. President, when you say the Oval Office was used like a bargaining chip, people are going to demand clarity. Can you expand on that?" Obama leaned back slightly, unshaken. "Let me put it this way," he said. "When I was in office, I didn't agree with every advisor. I made mistakes like any human being, but the duty was always to the country first. With Donald Trump, too often it wasn't. Too often it was about his empire, his image, his survival." The silence was so heavy you could hear the faint hum of the studio lights. A woman in the third row whispered almost to herself, "He's been holding this in for years." Karen pressed, "Some critics will say this is political rivalry, that you're trying to settle old scores. What do you say to them?" Obama didn't even blink. "I've moved on. I don't need to run against Donald Trump anymore. But America is still living with the consequences of his choices. That's what concerns me." His words weren't fiery, but they hit harder than any shout. The contrast was surreal, his calm explanation against the storm he was unleashing. Then he shifted, adjusting his tie slightly, a small casual gesture before delivering something that felt anything but casual. "When you're commander-in-chief, you hear things the public doesn't. You see the machinery of government, the levers of power, and sometimes you see those levers pulled for reasons that have nothing to do with protecting the American people. That's when you realize how fragile this system really is." Karen jumped in quickly, sensing the gravity. "Are you suggesting Donald Trump endangered national security?" Obama paused deliberately, eyes fixed on her, then back to the camera. "I'm saying that when personal interest guides decisions in the White House, the country is less safe, period." The audience erupted again. Some gasped, others applauded. Phones were raised high, recording live streaming. A college student in the back whispered to his friend, "He's dismantling him live." Behind the glass control booth, producers argued in frantic tones. Do we cut to break? Do we keep rolling? Nobody wanted to stop. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was a freight train barreling forward. Obama didn't flinch. "This is not about partisanship," he continued. "It's about truth. And truth doesn't care about party lines." Karen's voice dropped, almost hesitant now. "Then what do you want the American people to do with this truth?" Obama turned his gaze directly into the camera. "They need to remember democracy doesn't run on loyalty to one man. It runs on loyalty to the Constitution, to the people, to the truth itself. When we forget that, we lose everything." There was a shift in the room, not just applause, not just murmurs, but something heavier, emotional, almost physical. A teenager in the crowd muttered, "This feels like history class." But Lev, his mother, squeezed his shoulder and whispered, "This is history." Karen, clearly rattled, tried to press further. "Mr. President, critics will ask why you didn't warn people sooner, why you're speaking now years later." Obama softened his tone, but the weight only grew. "Because I believe the office itself would shape the man. I believe the weight of responsibility would change him. I was wrong." The gasp was louder this time. The admission hit like a hammer. For years Obama had been careful, never to openly criticize Trump this directly. But now he was admitting something even deeper, that he had misjudged the man. Karen leaned closer. "And what about now? Do you think he's changed?" Obama shook his head slowly. "I think power only made him more desperate, and that's dangerous." Applause roared through the studio again, sharper this time, almost like a rallying cry. Obama waited, unshaken, then leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "The truth always comes out, and when it does, the real question is, what do we do with it?" The camera stayed locked on his face, capturing the stillness, the intensity. The crowd hushed once more, hanging on the words, but even then he hadn't dropped his biggest revelation that was still to come. And when it came, it would set not just the studio, but the entire nation on fire. The audience barely had time to absorb Obama's last words before Karen Delaney leaned forward again, sensing the entire country was on the edge of its seat. "Mr. President," she said carefully, "you've spoken about personal interest, about choices that put the country at risk. Can you give us one specific example, something Americans would understand?" The question hung in the air like a dare. Obama didn't flinch. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together, his voice steady. "All right," he said. "Let me share one thing the public never fully heard about. During Donald Trump's presidency, he pushed aggressively for certain international deals that on the surface seemed to be about trade and diplomacy. But what most people don't know is that behind closed doors, he asked how those deals could benefit his own businesses." The audience gasped. Several hands shot to mouth. A low wave of whispers rippled through the studio. Karen straightened in her seat, eyes wide. "Are you saying he blurred the line between his role as president and as a businessman?" Obama shook his head slowly. "I'm saying there was no line for him. I sat in briefings where staff had asked themselves, is this policy about the United States or about Donald Trump's empire? And too often the two didn't match." The silence was deafening. Phones shot up recording. A young woman in the front row whispered, "Oh my God, he's actually saying it out loud." Karen pressed harder, her pen trembling in her hand. "Mr. President, can you give a concrete example of this conflict of interest?" Obama hesitated for just a moment, as though weighing how far to go, then spoke with precision. "I'll say this. When military assets were being discussed for certain regions, the question wasn't just about security. It was also about where Trump-branded properties were located. That should tell you everything you need to know." The reaction was immediate. An eruption of gasps, murmurs, outrage. Some clapped in disbelief. Others shook their heads in shock. Karen's face went pale. "Mr. President, are you suggesting that American military presence abroad was influenced by the location of Trump businesses?" Obama looked straight into the camera. "I'm not suggesting it. I'm saying it." The studio exploded. Not just applause this time, but a roar. People half rose out of their seats. Phones everywhere, capturing the moment for history. The control booth behind the glass descended into chaos. Producers shouting into headsets, one mouthing the words, "This is a bombshell." Karen struggled to steady her voice. "Mr. President, that is an extraordinary claim. Why haven't we heard this before?" Obama remained calm, because much of it was buried. Reports watered down, advisors silenced. Too often the people tasked with protecting the office ended up protecting the man instead. "That's not what the Constitution intended." A man in the audience muttered loud enough for the microphones to catch. "That's corruption. Straight up corruption." The crowd buzzed, some nodding in agreement. Karen leaned in. "If this is true and you're saying it is, then what does it mean for the country now?" Obama exhaled, his tone grave. "It means America has to decide whether it values truth over convenience, because the easy thing is to look away, to pretend it doesn't matter. But if we ignore it, we send a message to every future leader. Personal gain comes before national duty. That's not just dangerous, it's deadly to democracy." The applause returned, not like an outburst, but like thunder rolling through the room, heavy and relentless. Some audience members stood clapping hard, their faces solemn, not celebratory. And outside the studio, America was already reacting. Within minutes, the first clips hit social media. A college student in Madison, Wisconsin, uploaded shaky footage of her TV with the caption, "Obama just said Trump used military power to protect his business. This is insane." Within 5 minutes, it had 100,000 views. By midnight, millions hashtags ignited like wildfire. $, Obama bombshell. $, Trump secrets. $, truth on live TV. In St. Louis, factory workers crowded around a diner television, replaying the moment. "Play that back. Play that back," one shouted. A waitress shook her head and muttered, "If that's true, we've all been played for fool." In a college dorm in Austin, students screamed at the screen. "No way, he just said that," one yelled, pacing with his hands on his head. Another chimed in, "He didn't just say it, he owned it. This is receipt." In small-town Montana, Bar patrons leaned over their beers, silent, as the local news replayed the clip. One old rancher finally spoke. "Never thought I'd hear a president call another one out like that. Not love." Social media only magnified the shock. TikTok. In small-town Montana, bar patrons leaned over their beers, silent, as the local news replayed the clip. One old rancher finally spoke. "Never thought I'd hear a president call another one out like that. Not love." Social media only magnified the shock. TikTok filled with split-screen edits. Obama calm, composed on one side, Trump's angry old rants on the other. Memes spread instantly. Obama sipping water with captions like he nuked him without raising his voice. Celebrities weighed in. A Hollywood actor tweeted, "Obama with the mic drop of the decade. Calm, surgical, devastating." A famous musician added, "This is the interview they'll teach in history classes 20 years from now." But not everyone was celebrating. At Mar-a-Lago, chaos erupted. Trump's meltdown. An aide later described the moment. Trump was pacing in front of the television, jaw tight, remote in one hand, phone in the other. Obama's words replayed on loop. "There was no line for him. He can't say that about me." Trump roared, slamming the remote so hard the batteries flew across the table. Plates rattled. Staff flinched. He lunged for his phone, thumbs firing across the screen. "Total lies by failed Obama. Disgraceful. I did more for this country than anyone in history." The tweet went viral instantly. Then another Obama jealous. "Worst president ever." And another witch hunt. Fake news. Total smear. Within 30 minutes, nearly 20 all-caps rants flooded his timeline. Online, the contrast was brutal. Side-by-side clips spread. Obama calm, deliberate. Trump frantic, hammering his phone. Captions read, "Spot the difference." At a bar in Columbus, Ohio, a patron laughed bitterly as the bartender turned up the volume. "He's proving Obama right without even realizing it." In Reno, two women scrolling in the checkout line shook their heads. "I didn't vote for Obama," one said, "but tonight, he looks like a leader." Trump looks like a teenager on Snapchat. Even some Republicans admitted privately, the optics were devastating. One senator texted a colleague, later leaked to the press, "We can't defend this, he looks unstable." Back at PBS, Karen Delaney received a note from her producer, slid discreetly across the desk. In bold letters, "Trump is melting down on Twitter." She swallowed hard, then looked at Obama. "Mr. President, I've just been told former President Trump is reacting right now. He's calling your statements lies. He says you're jealous. Do you want to respond?" Obama didn't even blink. He folded his hands, gave the faintest nod. That's his choice. He can shout all he wants, but shouting doesn't change the truth. The crowd erupted in applause again, some laughing at the quiet jab. Karen pressed, "Do you think his response proves your point?" Obama's eyes met hers. "I think his response speaks for itself." That single line ricocheted across the internet. Like lightning, memes appeared within minutes. Obama's calm face, next to Trump's furious tweets, caption simply speaks for itself. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump was still fuming, still demanding airtime, still pacing as aides scrambled, but it didn't matter. The story had already left his control, and everyone watching knew the night wasn't over yet, because Obama hadn't even revealed the most dangerous truth. By the time the PBS broadcast cut to its last commercial break, the interview had already taken on a life of its own. Clips dominated Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, bouncing from phone to phone like sparks across dry grass. News outlets that had long since written off primetime political interviews scrambled to rearrange their coverage. This wasn't just a headline, it was an earthquake. But the real aftershocks were still coming. When the cameras rolled back, Karen Delaney's tone had shifted. She looked tense, almost rattled, but she knew what America wanted. "Mr. President," she said carefully, "you've accused Donald Trump of blurring personal gain with national duty. You've given us one example. Is there more you want to share?" The studio went silent. Obama's face remained steady, though his voice carried a gravity heavier than before. "Yes," he said plainly, "because the truth doesn't serve the country if it stays hidden." The audience leaned in, holding their breath. "There were moments," Obama continued, "when Donald Trump was briefed on classified information. Intelligence that was supposed to stay within a tight circle meant only to protect the United States. Yet, that information didn't always stay where it belonged. There were times when details found their way into private conversations with people who had no business knowing them.
And some of those people stood to benefit financially. The room gasped. Karen nearly dropped her pen. Mr. President, are you saying Donald Trump leaked classified information for profit? Obama paused deliberately, letting the weight of the words hang in the air before answering. I'm saying the line between what was national security and what was self-interest was erased. That should terrify every American. The audience erupted, some in outrage, some in disbelief, some in applause. Phones lit up again, thousands of screens recording, hashtags surged, a new number sign, Trump leaks, number sign, Obama truth, number sign, national security. Karen pressed her voice sharp. Do you have proof? Obama looked into the camera unflinching. Proof exists. Whether Americans will be allowed to see it, that's the question. But I can promise you this, I wouldn't say it here, love, if it weren't true. The applause this time was thunderous. Some people stood, others shouted in agreement. The room wasn't just watching history, they were participating in it. And outside the country was split wide open. In Washington, D.C., aides rushed through late-night hallways, phones pressed to their ears, muttering the words, classified leaks, over and over. On cable news, anchors interrupted regular programming to play the clip, their voices almost trembling as they repeated it. In coffee shops across Chicago, strangers leaned over tables, debating in real time. If he's right, that's treason. If he's wrong, why does it feel so believable? In a Texas bar, the volume was cranked on the flat screen. Patrons argued fiercely. One man slammed his glass down and shouted, Obama's making it up. Another shot back. Then why does Trump look so damn guilty every time? The bar roared with arguments until the bartender finally barked, shut up and listen. This is history. Online, the chaos was unmatched. Within hours, the Obama interview was trending worldwide. Commentators posted side-by-side montages. Obama calm, direct, measured, Trump red-faced, tweeting in all caps. The contrast was brutal. A viral TikTok looped Obama's line, "The truth doesn't beg for cameras to be cut," over footage of Trump screaming at rallies. Millions shared it with captions like, "One man lost control, the other never did." Even overseas headlines exploded. British tabloids screamed, "Obama accuses Trump of leaking secrets." German outlets ran somber features about American democracy on trial. In Tokyo, a morning news show played the clip on repeat, the hosts shaking their heads in disbelief. And at Mar-a-Lago, Trump spiraled further. He ranted through the night, calling into friendly networks, demanding airtime, shouting that Obama was lying, that it was all fake, that he had been the most transparent president in history. But the harder he shouted, the smaller he seemed. Commentators replayed the rants alongside Obama's measured calm, and the difference was devastating. By dawn, PBS announced that Obama had agreed to stay for a short follow-up segment, recorded after the broadcast, but aired the next day. The anticipation was electric. People skipped work to tune in. Teachers rolled televisions into classrooms. Families gathered around kitchen table. When the segment aired, Obama sat in the same chair, posture unchanged, voice steady. Karen asked him the question on everyone's mind. "Mr. President, do you regret speaking out?" He shook his head once. Number, because silence enables corruption, and the truth only matters if people are willing to hear it. Karen pressed further. "What do you want Americans to take from this moment?" Obama leaned into the camera, his words slow, deliberate, almost like a warning etched in stone. "Democracy is fragile. It depends on leaders who put the people first. If we tolerate selfishness, dishonesty and secrecy in the highest office, then the system collapses. That's not about one man, it's about all of us. The question isn't whether Donald Trump failed. The question is whether we, the American people, will demand better." The silence after was heavy, then applause, long sustained, not like a studio show but like a movement rising. And across America, people repeated those words in classrooms, in factories, in kitchens, on sidewalks. The question isn't whether he failed. The question is whether we will demand better. It wasn't the fireworks of a rally. It wasn't the anger of a rant. It was something quieter, steadier, and ultimately stronger. A reminder that leadership isn't about volume, it's about truth. Donald Trump's fury lit up the internet for days, but it was Barack Obama's calm, measured sentences that lingered, and history would remember the night Not for the tweets or the outbursts, but for the moment a former president finally looked into the camera and told America what it had long suspected, that the truth, once spoken, cannot be taken back. The week after the PBS interview felt less like ordinary politics, and more like the fallout from an earthquake. News anchors on every network replayed the clip of Obama's calm words side by side with Trump's furious late-night tirades. Analysts called it the contrast of the decade. One man measured steady, almost surgical, the other frantic, loud, unraveling in public view. But outside the television studios, the real story was unfolding in kitchens, classrooms, union halls, and church pews across America. Ordinary people who had long avoided politics now found themselves debating it at dinner table. Grandparents who had lived through Watergate told their grandchildren this moment felt bigger. College students, usually glued to sports or streaming shows, were glued instead to news clips on their phones. Everyone seemed to feel it. A line had been crossed and there was no going back. In Washington, the fallout was immediate. Lawmakers were swarmed by reporters in Capitol hallways. Democrats demanded investigation. Republicans ducked cameras or issued carefully worded statements. A senator from the Midwest muttered under his breath, "He just cracked open the door and now the whole country is going to walk through it." Committees convened emergency sessions. Staffers pored over old classified reports and whispers of subpoenas filled the air. For years, questions about Trump's business entanglements and decision-making had been dismissed as speculation. Now, with Obama's voice carrying the weight of a former president, those questions had teeth. One aide confided to a journalist, "The difference is, Obama didn't sound like a partisan, he sounded like a witness." That single perception shifted everything. Meanwhile, the international stage was watching closely. In London, Paris, and Berlin, newspapers plastered Obama's revelations across front pages. Allies wondered aloud if U.S. policy decisions had been compromised during Trump's years in office. Diplomats, who once smiled politely at Trump behind closed doors, now admitted their fears had been real. A European ambassador was quoted saying, "It confirms what we suspected, that America was being run as a business, not a nation." In Moscow and Beijing, the reaction was more muted, but telling. State-controlled media replayed clips of Trump's chaotic responses, subtly mocking him as unstable. The global perception of American leadership was shifting again, not through an election or a war, but through a single interview that pulled back the curtain. Back in America, Trump's fury only grew. At Mar-a-Lago, aides described a man consumed, watching television endlessly, shouting at staff, demanding loyalty oaths from allies. His lawyers urged restraint, but Trump doubled down, promising lawsuits, investigations, even arrest. He phoned governors, congressmen, donors, anyone who would listen, ranting about Obama, the media, the deep state. But for the first time in years, many of those calls ended awkwardly. Some allies offered vague assurances, but privately admitted they couldn't defend him anymore. One donor was overheard saying, "It's not just that Obama hit him, it's that he can't stop bleeding." The sense of invincibility that had once surrounded Trump seemed to evaporate overnight. And yet, the moment wasn't just about Trump unraveling, it was about Obama stepping into a new role. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't gloated, he hadn't even raised his voice. He had simply told the truth, piece by piece, and trusted the American people to decide what to do with. In the days after, clips of his calm warnings spread through classrooms and workplaces. Teachers played the interview for civic students. Pastors quoted his lines about truth and democracy from pulpits. A factory worker in Detroit told a local reporter, "For once, it didn't feel like spin. It felt like someone finally said out loud what we've all been thinking." That was the quiet power of the moment. It wasn't just Obama versus Trump, it was the truth versus the noise. By Friday, the Department of Justice had been pressed into the spotlight. Journalists shouted questions about whether investigations would be reopened, whether Obama's claims would be verified. Officials refused to comment, but leaks trickled out. Whispers that certain reports once buried were now being dusted off. Legal analysts debated, on cable news, whether Trump could face new scrutiny. Some dismissed it as impossible, others warned it was inevitable. But the public perception had already shifted. In conversations across America, people weren't asking if Obama was right. They were asking how much more he hadn't yet revealed. In small towns, the conversations took on a raw honesty rarely seen in national politics. At a barber shop in Dayton, one man told another, "I didn't vote for Obama, but he sounded like a man who cared more about the country than himself." Trump sounded like a man who only cared about himself.